Imagine for a minute you're an alien, and you have 6 arms, 4 legs, and 3 heads. And you've come to planet Earth to make some observations about us Earthlings. And in doing your observations, you've noticed a couple things. 7.5 billion people on planet Earth, roughly. The average lifespan is between 70 to 80 years, depending on where you look. And almost everybody on planet Earth does this thing called work. In fact, we spend the majority of our life, the majority of our existence on planet Earth, doing this thing called work. And the majority of people that do this thing called work here on planet Earth feel like they are doing jobs that don't fulfill them, feel like they are working for organizations that don't care about them, and they feel like they're working for managers that don't treat them well. And so you would gather all this information and you would go back to your alien friends and say, guys, these people on planet Earth, they have things a little bit backwards. And you wouldn't be that far off, would you? In fact, if you were to look up the word employee in the dictionary, you would find that synonyms for the word employee include cog, servant, and slave. If you were to look up the word manager in the dictionary, you would find that synonyms include slave driver, boss, and zookeeper, which is my favorite one. And if you were to look up the word work in the dictionary, you would find that synonyms include daily grind, drudgery, and struggle. Now, if you put these 3 things together, we're all cogs working for a zookeeper as we go about our daily drudgery. Whew. Man, work sucks. In fact, the majority of people watch the movie Office Space as if it's some kind of a documentary instead of a comedic film.
Do you want to hear something really crazy? 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed. Help me change that number around by subscribing so that you can get access to more videos just like this one. And now, let's get back to the content.
We all watch that movie and say, oh, ha, ha, that's funny. Oh, God, that's my life. Right? We die a little bit on the inside every time we watch that. Now, thankfully, we're starting to see changes inside of our organizations around how we think about work and how we're redefining employee, manager, and work. And there are 5 trends that are causing us to rethink our assumptions around work. The first is around behaviors. These are behaviors that are largely fueled by social technologies, fueled by the web, the way that we communicate, collaborate, engage with each other, the way that we purchase. All of these different new behaviors that are being fueled by social technologies in our personal lives are making their way inside of our organizations. The second trend that we touched on a little bit earlier was around changing demographics. Not just millennials, but changing demographics in general. Now, I know we've all been beaten over the head with the millennial stick to the point of almost being unconscious, but the reality is that a lot of the research shows that although there are some differences between millennials and other generations, they're not that different. In fact, if you were to get rid of all the millennials inside of your company, you would still have people that care about workplace flexibility, compensation, job growth, learning, development, all these different types of opportunities. But it appears that millennials have more of a voice, and today they are the largest workforce demographic inside of all of our organizations. And so when organizations around the world say that they are trying to create a place for millennials, really what they're saying is that we want to create a place for everybody. They just don't realize that that's actually what they're saying. The second trend that we're seeing is around globalization. Simply put, globalization is essentially this idea that the world that we live in is becoming like one big city. The language that you speak, the currency that you transact in, the culture that you subscribe to, where you're physically located, all of these things are starting to matter less and less and less as far as boundaries to doing business. The fourth trend that we're seeing is around mobility. Years ago, I went to China just for fun. And I went to all the typical Chinese provinces that one would expect to go to. And in one of the provinces in Yunnan, I rented bikes. I was there with my college roommate at the time. And we rented bikes. We went out into the middle of nowhere. Now, I live in the Bay Area, mind you. Here we are in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles away in a rice paddy field. And we're taking pictures, just admiring the sights. And not too far away from us, there was a rice paddy farmer. And the rice paddy farmer was in the field going about doing his chores. Then he stops for a minute, puts his hand in his pocket, and takes out a smartphone. Now, I was fascinated by this because I live in the place that most people perceive to be this tech and innovation hub of the world. And here we are, thousands of miles away from the Bay Area, in the middle of nowhere, in a rice paddy field. And here is a farmer that has access to the same people, the same content, the same information that I do living in the Bay Area. That's mobility. The fifth trend that we're seeing is around technology. Big data, wearable devices, augmented and virtual reality, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robots, automation, all of these amazing technologies that are coming into our organizations. Now, I too am an optimist. And I firmly believe that even with this influx of technology, we still have to remember the people component, the human component inside of our organizations. Because while many organizations can exist without technology, no organization in the world can exist without people. So how do we create an organization where people want to show up every day, where they want to bring their best ideas, their hopes, their fears, their dreams? How do we create this type of an organization? Now, for decades, we've been investing in employee engagement. I'm sure all of you here work for organizations that have been investing in employee engagement initiatives. So how is it that investment in employee engagement has never been higher, meanwhile the scores have never been lower? We never spent more money on institutions and surveys and tools to drive employee engagement and happiness at work. And at the same time, the scores have never been lower. How does that make any sense? The big problem that we're starting to see with employee engagement at organizations around the world is that it focuses on short-term solutions to a long-term problem. It doesn't change the system. So basically what we do is we take employees, we put them inside of outdated workplace practices, and we give them perks to distract them from the situation of their lives. So you work in an environment that still implements these outdated workplace practices, but you get hot yoga. You get free food. You can bring your dog to work. And so we're very focused on these perks, these ways of trying to make employees a little bit happier. And it gives you a little bit of a short-term boost. But let's be honest, nobody shows up day one at your organization saying, man, this place sucks. Nobody does that on day one. Day one, people are excited. Where's my team? Who am I going to sit with? What tools am I going to use? Oh my God, this is awesome. Right? You guys are excited on day one. So something happens over time where our satisfaction starts to decrease. And at that point, annual employee engagement survey is done. The organization turns to HR and says, fix this. We introduce a perk. And then we get this kind of up and down movement with very little actual true business impact and performance to the organization. And now we're seeing the rise of something else known as employee experience. That is, how do you actually change the system? How do you actually change the core workplace practices in which employees work, as opposed to focusing on the shorter-term solutions?